When we think of caste in India, the images that come to our mind are usually from the past: untouchability, separate wells, denied temple entry. But in today's India, caste hasn't gone away, it just changed its form. It's more invisible now, more polite, more coded, and sometimes that makes it even harder to challenge. In this video, let's talk about how casteism works today, how it hides in everyday interactions, in our schools, offices, homes, and even in how we define success. Caste cues are still actively sought. People ask your full name, native place, or family occupation not out of casual interest but to decode caste identity. Once they know, subtle distancing can follow. Caste coded insults like chapri, chandal, kavdi, or bhangi are used to mock someone's accent, clothes, or mannerisms without explicitly naming caste. Domestic workers and helpers are often given separate utensils or cups. Families explain this as a matter of hygiene, but logic traces back to caste purity rules, not actual sanitation. Workers may be told to sit on the floor instead of furniture, to use back entrances, or to avoid using household toilet. In apartment complexes, residents' WhatsApp groups sometimes circulate casteist jokes or memes without challenge. Even in casual conversation, remarks about good families or cultured people often carry caste undertones. This idea of hygiene as a reason for separation has roots in Brahminical notions of purity and pollution, where certain castes were labeled impure by birth. Over time, this religious concept was reframed as a cleanliness concern, even in modern homes. The same people who worry about hygiene with maids or service workers rarely, if ever, ask invited guests whether they have bathed before serving them in household utensils or letting them into the kitchen. The assumption that certain people are less clean, regardless of their actual hygiene, is not about health, it's about preserving caste boundaries. These everyday acts may seem small, but together they reinforce caste boundaries and teach the next generation who belongs where. In schools and colleges, reserved category students are often singled out for how they got in, with classmates or teachers hinting or directly saying it must be quota. Professors may set lower expectations, not push them for competitive opportunities, or attribute their achievements to reservation rather than ability. Group work can reveal bias when these students are excluded from study circles or denied leadership roles. There's also constant stereotyping, assuming reserved category students are from rural backgrounds, weak in English, or less likely to understand complex subjects. Even highly capable Bahujan students face suspicion with their successes framed as exceptions. This keeps alive the myth that merit is neutral and that only reservation disrupts it, ignoring how generational access to good schools, coaching, and educated parents benefit upper caste students long before any exam is written. For many reserved category students, the stigma is so persistent that they feel pressured to hide their caste identity, avoid discussing reservation, or overperform to prove themselves in ways their Savarna peers never have to. Corporates love to advertise inclusion, women only hiring drives, LGBTQ plus initiatives, but caste is almost never on the agenda. While gender and sexuality diversity earn public praise and align with global corporate values, caste inclusion is avoided because it directly challenges existing power structures in leadership and hiring. They claim caste doesn't matter in the private sector, yet hiring, promotions, and leadership roles are overwhelmingly dominated by the upper castes. Recruitment, heavily relies on referral networks, which themselves are caste homogeneous. Even when Bahujan candidates meet or exceed qualifications, they face barriers like biased interviews, assumptions about culture fit, and stereotypes about communication skills. Studies confirm the bias. Dalit candidates with identical resumes to upper caste candidates get far fewer callbacks. An Azam Premji University study found SEST ownership in companies is under 10% and representation in corporate boardrooms is negligible. Without caste disaggregated data, companies can claim they are casteless while continuing to benefit from exclusion. Diversity initiatives in corporates often end up uplifting only upper caste women or upper caste queer individuals, leaving Bahujan employees invisible. This selective inclusion allows companies to appear progressive without disrupting caste privilege. Housing discrimination today operates through coded language and unwritten rules. Rental listings often say vegetarians only or cultured families preferred, phrases that serve as proxies for caste, filtering out meat eating communities, many of whom are Bahujan. Landlords may demand details about tenant's surname, native place, or occupation to quietly determine caste before approving tenancy. Even after securing a home, caste boundaries are enforced in subtle ways: social isolation from neighbors, exclusion from resident events, or resistance to tenants bringing in domestic workers who use common areas. In some buildings, domestic staff are restricted to service elevators or separate entrances. These measures are justified as maintaining standards or security, but they function as modern extensions of untouchability. Housing societies and RWAs can act as gatekeepers, using community votes to reject applications from certain castes. This keeps neighborhoods socially homogeneous and preserves upper caste dominance in urban spaces. The result is that even in cities, caste dictates where people can live and how welcome they are once they move in. Caste remains one of the most rigid boundaries in relationships, often disguised under language like shared values or similar upbringing. Many families present themselves as progressive but will not accept a partner from another caste, especially from Dalit or Adivasi backgrounds. In matrimonial ads, caste preferences are stated outright, and on dating apps, the bios explicitly read no SEST. Even among urban educated Indians, endogamy rates remain extremely high. Over 90% of the marriages are still within the same caste, according to multiple NSSO and Pew Research studies. Intercaste couples often face intense pressure from subtle emotional manipulation to outright threats and violence. Bahujan partners may be expected to assimilate into upper caste family customs while their own traditions and identities are sidelined or erased. In some cases, relationships break under the combined weight of family opposition, social stigma, and economic consequences. These patterns show that caste isn't just about public spaces or jobs. It extends deeply into personal life, determining intimacy, family ties, and social acceptance. Caste discrimination in religion is not just historical, it's embedded in how many temples operate today. In most large Hindu temples, priesthood is still reserved for Brahmins, regardless of whether trained and qualified non-Brahmins are available. Even when the state government set up training programs to produce priests from all castes, appointments often face legal challenges, local resistance, or silent boycotts by devotees. The justifications range from appeals to tradition and scriptural authority to claims about ritual purity and the need for birth-based eligibility. These arguments ignore the reality that Hinduism is not monolithic. Many bhakti and folk traditions have long had non-Brahmin and Dalit spiritual leaders. In practice, restricting priesthood helps maintain Brahmin monopoly over religious authority, economic benefits from temple management, and control over cultural narratives. Discrimination isn't limited to priesthood. In some temples, Dalits are allowed entry only during certain hours or are made to stand separately during rituals. Festivals and processions may exclude them from carrying the deity's idol or participating in certain ceremonies. In village contexts, lower caste Hindus may still have separate temples or shrines, reinforcing spatial segregation. The Free Tamil Nadu Temples initiative, championed by Jaggi Vasudev, also called as Sadguru, is presented as a movement to restore temples to devotees and remove state interference. However, in Tamil Nadu, government control, introduced through Dravidian movement reforms, was a deliberate move to break the Brahmin monopoly over priesthood and temple administration. It enabled non-Brahmins and Dalits to train and serve as priests and brought some degree of accountability to temple resource use. Critics argue that freeing temples risks returning control to hereditary trustees historically dominated by upper castes, undoing decades of slow but significant progress towards inclusivity. Under the guise of tradition and spiritual autonomy, such a shift could reconcentrate religious authority, economic benefits, and cultural influence into the hands of narrow caste elite, reinforcing exclusionary practices in the name of cultural preservation. We often think of merit as an objective neutral measure of ability. In reality, it's built on the foundation of inherited advantages that are overwhelmingly concentrated among the upper caste groups. Elite schooling, fluent English, private coaching, educated parents who can guide homework, access to extracurriculars that build confidence. These are the resources passed on over generations of social and economic privilege. By the time two candidates sit for the same exam or job interview, one has had a lifetime of preparation, while the other may be the first in their family to finish school. I have made an entire video about the myth of merit. You can check it out here. Upper caste narratives dominate cinema, television, advertising, publishing, and even popular music. From Bollywood to mainstream newsrooms, the majority of decision makers, directors, producers, editors come from privileged caste backgrounds. This concentration of control shapes whose stories get told and how. When Bahujan characters appear in films or TV, they are often portrayed through narrow stereotypical lenses, either as victims in need of savior figures, as comic relief, or as violent, regressive antagonists. Rarely are they shown as complex protagonists with agency, ambition, and everyday lives outside of their caste identity. Meanwhile, upper caste characters are treated as default Indian, their traditions and aesthetics presented as universal. In literature and publishing, Dalit and Adivasi authors face higher barriers to entry. Their works are often pigeonholed as Dalit literature or activist writing, limiting the mainstream readership. The same stories, when told by upper caste writers, can be celebrated as bold social commentary. Even in media coverage, caste atrocities are downplayed or reframed to avoid naming caste. Headlines may refer to clashes or family disputes instead of acknowledging caste-based violence. The result is a cultural landscape where upper caste norms are normalized and Bahujan experiences are either erased, exoticized, or tokenized. This imbalance doesn't just reflect society, it shapes it. Media is a powerful tool in defining what is aspirational, respectable, or beautiful. When those standards are set almost entirely by upper caste creators, caste hierarchies get reinforced subtly, day after day, under the guise of neutral storytelling. On the surface, Indian politics appears diverse. There are Dalit, OBC, and Adivasi leaders in every major party. But closer examination shows that the real decision-making power, especially in national and state-level leadership roles, often remain concentrated in upper caste hands. Many Bahujan leaders are brought in as vote bank representatives with limited autonomy to challenge party hierarchies or set agendas that could disrupt caste privilege. Even within bureaucracies, despite reservation policies, upper caste dominance persists in top echelons. Senior IAS, IPS, and IFS postings are disproportionately held by individuals from privileged castes. Structural biases in recruitment exams, cadre allocation, and promotions means that marginalized groups often remain underrepresented in influential policymaking positions. One of the starkest examples of resistance to true representation is the ongoing opposition to caste census. Leaders from the upper caste backgrounds across party lines have historically resisted or delayed such counts, arguing it will divide the society, when in reality, it threatens to expose the scale of inequality and disproportionate hold of certain castes on resources and positions of power. Without transparent data and genuine power sharing, representation risks become tokenistic, providing the appearance of inclusivity while ensuring that the levers of the governance remain firmly in the hands of a narrow elite. Many people who accept reservation in public sector jobs strongly oppose it in the private sector, arguing that businesses should be merit driven and free from government interference. But this stance ignores the fact that private sector in India is already shaped by deep caste privilege. The vast majority of leadership, managerial, and high-paying positions are held by upper caste individuals, largely due to generational access to elite education, professional networks, and capital. The public sector, despite its flaws, has been partially transformed by reservation, creating more diversity and breaking some caste monopolies. The private sector, however, has faced no such mandate. Hiring here often happens through referrals and informal networks, both of which tend to be caste homogeneous, ensuring that opportunities circulate within privileged groups. Opposition to private sector reservation is therefore not just about efficiency or competitiveness as it is often claimed. It is also about protecting existing hierarchies. The fear is that reservation could redistribute opportunities, disrupt comfortable caste based dominance in corporate spaces, and make visible the extent of exclusion that currently goes unquestioned. Without mandated inclusion, the private sector can continue to present itself as casteless while functioning as one of the most caste segregated arenas in modern India. Caste in India did not vanish, it just adapted. It slipped out of old laws and signs on the wall and learned to speak in polite code. It hides in the boardroom full of the same surnames. It lives in the temples where only one kind of man can hold the deity. It survives in apartment complex that says vegetarians only. The HR meeting where cultural fit means people like us. The wedding where the filter is set before the guest list is made. We've been told this is merit, tradition, culture, neutral, natural, fair. But these words are shields covering the same hierarchy that has existed for centuries. Merit was never neutral. It was built by those who already owned the racetrack. Tradition wasn't always sacred. Sometimes it was just privilege written in stone. And when the silence is this deep, it isn't peace, it is complicity. If we are serious about ending casteism, we can't just look for it in history books or violent headlines. We have to look for it in questions we don't ask our friends, the referrals we make without thinking, the stories we choose to tell. The truth is uncomfortable. Caste lives because we let it live, and it will only die when we decide to see it, name it, and refuse to protect it any longer.